Are you representing any of the 4 alleged victims in the grand jury indictment?
Charges that were brought down today.
I am representing at least one individual identified in the grand jury indictment, and I am not going to identify that individual because obviously they were a minor at the time.
Are all your clients in this jurisdiction or another jurisdiction?
I'm sorry?
Are all your clients in this jurisdiction or another jurisdiction?
Multiple jurisdictions around the country.
Michael, can you explain to us, you talked about obstruction of justice. Can you give us some sense of what that is and what you have uncovered?
In connection with the 2008 trial, there is no question that Mr. Kelly and many of those around him engaged in obstruction of justice through threats and intimidation of witnesses, secreting certain witnesses outside the jurisdiction, outside the reach of prosecutors here in Chicago, engaging in the payment to various witnesses in order to shape their testimony, as well as the payment of monies designed to procure evidence so that it could subsequently be destroyed and kept out of the hands of prosecutors here in Chicago. This trial was rigged in 2008. Make no mistake about it. And that is how they were able to procure the acquittal of Mr. Kelly in 2008. And I am highly confident that this time around the result will not be the same.
Are the two whistleblowers
So
that
I know
you-
you don't want to identify the victim you're representing in the grand jury. They were identified by initials. Can you at least tell us which of those initials so we know which case you are
Yeah,
associated with?
I'm not going to do that at this time because I don't think it's appropriate, but I think at an appropriate time I will.
Are you aware
Are
of
the
the
two
grand jury
whistleblowers
seen the
that you're
video?
representing, you referred also to enablers. Are there people that you would consider to have been former enablers? And can you talk about what knowledge directly they have of this, these payments or anything that were made?
I'm not at liberty to answer that question now because I don't want to out the confidentiality of the individuals that I represent who have now provided information to prosecutors. I don't want to put a target on their back during this very sensitive time. So I'm not willing to discuss in detail what their role was vis-a-vis Mr. Kelly, but they were close enough to him that they had knowledge of a lot of his conduct and a lot of his activities over the better part of 2 decades, including in connection with the 2008 trial and the obstruction efforts that I mentioned moments ago.
At least that they intended to use that as a means to try to obtain the indictment.
I have certain knowledge as it relates to the grand jury, but I'm not going to discuss what that knowledge is or what the grand jury saw or did not see because those proceedings are secret by design, by law here in Illinois, and it would not be appropriate for me to comment on what the grand jury had at their disposal in connection with their charging decision.
Are the incidents depicted on the videotape linked to any of the charges in the indictment?
Yes.
Michael,
Can you describe it to
the
me?
trial is rigged is quite a statement. Are you casting aspersions against Judge Vincent Cohen or the prosecutors, the state's attorney at that time? Who?
No, I'm not,
rigged the trial?
I'm not casting aspersions as it relates to the sitting judge or prosecutors in that case, most certainly not the prosecutors or the sitting judge, or even Mr. Kelly's defense counsel that handled the trial directly in that case. What I am saying unequivocally is that Mr. Kelly and many around him engaged in each of the acts that I identified earlier as it relates to rigging that trial and the outcome.
So are you
undertake,
talking about, we wrote a story in July 2008.
well, you've written a lot of great stories.
I've written a lot of stories. July 2008, Gone unseals one of the 153 sealed transcripts. Lisa Van Allen was threatened by the then manager of Kelly with being murked. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's one act, but that was...
So are you representing Van Allen?
No, I'm not presently representing Van Allen, but what I'm telling you is that was not a single incident of that type of conduct. There was all kinds
I'm well aware.
There were all kinds of shenanigans that
Yeah.
went on, obstruction of justice acts in connection with the 2008 trial. That would be one of many.
New York is frustrated. New York is frustrated that Kim Spock's office is not cooperating.
New York,
3 federal agencies in New York, 2 jurisdictions, Eastern, Southern, a sitting grand jury, and they're not getting cooperation from Chicago. Chicago screwed this up the first time. Why shouldn't it be federal?
well, I'm highly confident that, well, first of all, I think the fix was in the first time, so I don't think prosecutors got a fair swing at the pitch, if you will, number one. And number two, I'm highly confident that nothing's going to be screwed up this time, and if I had any doubts about that, then I would not have turned the evidence over to Ms. Fox and her staff. I would have turned it over to others. but I feel highly confident in Ms. Fox's ability. There's little question in my mind that her and her office are going to be able to gain a conviction. As it relates to the cooperation level, from what I've witnessed, there has been cooperation with Ms. Fox, although I haven't been privy to many of those communications. But it's not unusual for state prosecutors and federal prosecutors to sometimes butt heads as it relates to who's going to take the lead in connection with a investigation. So I'm confident that any federal prosecutor that deems it necessary, they too will have their chance to charge Mr. Kelly. And it's one of the reasons why I don't believe that he'll ever walk free, because I think he will be brought up on other charges in the future, whether they be related to the Mann Act or other conduct that Mr. Kelly and his enablers engaged in.
Mr. Michael Avenatti, would you explain to us about whether or not this tape, this videotape that you handed over to the state's attorney, was that part of your accusations about obstruction of justice? Is this tape?
To gain a acquittal in connection with that case. So the answer would be yes. Sir?
You speak of the enablers, and you made it sound like they were instrumental in procuring these young women. Would you explain what you mean by that, and exactly what did they enable?
Well, here's what I'll say. You don't carry out over 2 decades of sexual abuse targeting girls under the age of 18 and travel with them around the country and put them up, whether it be in your residence or hotel rooms or elsewhere, provide for them in certain circumstances, keep them from speaking with other people and the like without help. So there's no question that people very close to R. Kelly participated in this conduct and enabled it, all in the interest of money, because they did not want to interfere with their payday, and they recognized that if he was charged and convicted, their payday would end. And that is the predominant reason why they engaged in this conduct, and I think ultimately many of them are going to be forced to account for their role in all of this over the last 25 years.
Can you describe what was in the other 2 videos, and if the victims in today's indictment are pictured in those videos?
Yeah, I'm not prepared to describe what is depicted in the other or shown in the other 2 videos at this time.
But can you say if today's victims in the indictment are in those videos?
One of them is.
One of them is.
Because there is a video here that we're talking about, what other charges do you think that R. Kelly could be facing as your investigation continues? Today there's the 10 counts of sexual abuse. Could he, down the road, could they be adding more charges against?
I think they may certainly add additional charges. You could say it's a superseding indictment or something similar to that. I think, frankly, the charging decision today was very well thought out and was conservative, and it was very smartly done by Kim Fox. I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think you're likely to see additional state charges as well as federal charges. The video camera and adjust the camera angle, zooming in, changing the direction of the shot, and things of that nature. So there's no question that he knew exactly what he was doing. At one time, or at one point in time on the video, in the first scene, it is clear that Mr. Kelly is having the victim watch another piece of pornography, which appears to be him with yet another young girl on a big screen television in the background. Repeatedly on the video, the young lady refers to Mr. Kelly as Daddy. The video depicts Mr. Kelly engaged in oral sex with the young victim, both receiving as well as giving, as well as vaginal intercourse and anal penetration. There are also instances of Mr. Kelly urinating on the young girl on the videotape. This video was turned over again to Ms. Fox and others in our office earlier this month, within days of our recovery of the tape. We have since provided additional information and evidence to Ms. Fox and others in her office. We envision continuing to do so because our investigation is not complete. We are aware of 2 other tapes in existence, one of which we have recovered, the second of which we are in the process of recovering, and as soon as we do, we will be providing those tapes as well to Ms. Fox and others in her office. Today marks a watershed moment in the 25 years of abuse by this predator known as R. Kelly. He, together with those that enabled him, undertook a course of action over 2 decades to abuse and sexually assault young girls, especially many of whom were the most vulnerable in our society. Girls that many would not listen to. Girls that came from very tough times and tough neighborhoods in many instances. These were the most vulnerable. And yet this predator, Mr. Kelly, preyed on them repeatedly. I want to send a message to the enablers of Mr. Kelly, to the agents and the managers and the attorneys and the others who stood idly by and looked the other way and turned a blind eye while teenage girls were sexually assaulted for over 2 decades. I will not rest until each of you is brought to justice. We will uncover evidence relating to your participation in these crimes. Mr. Kelly did not do this alone. He did so with the assistance of all of these folks. And it was all, let's be clear, in the interest of money. These people, these agents, these attorneys, and these managers, they looked the other way while these young girls were taken advantage of instead of doing the right thing because they didn't want to kill the golden goose. They didn't want to interfere with their own individual paydays. And as far as I'm concerned, they are just as guilty as the predator R. Kelly. It is disgusting. And every parent in America should be disgusted not only by the conduct of Mr. Kelly, but by those that turned a blind eye, that looked the other way while this occurred for over 2 decades. As a father of 2 teenage girls, 14 and 16, I am especially outraged and disgusted by this conduct and the amount of time that it has taken to bring this predator to justice. I stand here before you as a father and as a man that believes in the rule of law and that of justice with a sense of satisfaction, temporary satisfaction today as a result of these very serious charges. But our job is not done. We are going to continue to represent our clients. We are going to continue to do what we've done for over 10 months.